This is the DDM tuning single relay HID harness. Figured I'd make a little video kind of going through how it works and what you might use it for. So you basically got this relay which is going to control power to this harness. So your first two connections, this fuse connection right here is the positive side, and this other connection right here is your negative side. So you would attach those two, positive and negative, on the battery. That's going to give power to the harness itself. So whatever is attached to these connectors, that's what's going to power them. So if I were to connect those two leads, nothing's going to happen because it's on a relay. So what controls the relay is actually by both of the output plugs. You've got these little connectors. Okay, each side has got them. So basically what these connectors do right here, once you trigger this with 12 volts, you would put this on your switch. So once this sends 12 volts to the relay is going to trigger and send your power through the harness. And basically this side's a little bit longer, so what that allows you to do is the shorter side would be, like, let's say you were putting this on a vehicle and the battery is on the driver's side. You would want this to be the driver's side headlight, and then run this longer side over to your passenger side, and vice versa if the battery was on the other side. And let's say your battery's in the trunk or whatever, you're still going to be able to pick up 12 volts somewhere under the hood. So I've actually went over that in my Lincoln video. You can see I grabbed 12 volts going into the fuse box. So I'll put a little link in there so you can check that out. But I figured I'd kind of just show it on the bench, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to hook this thing up to the battery. I've got a couple of H11 bulbs here, and I've got an old HID harness. So basically what's going to happen here, I'm going to run some test leads off of here, and I'm going to plug this into to trigger the harness. So that's going to be the activating the switch that's going to power the harness itself. So I'm going to plug these two H11s in where you would normally put in like an HID ballast. There and there. Now this harness is a little bit different. Like if you get a high-low kit, the harnessing for that's a little different. It's got a little different grounding. I've actually got an H4 high-low kit here, so I'll kind of run through that real quick just to show the difference. Alright, so here I've got the harness all wired up for a bench test. So you got the plugs. I just got a H11 bulb in each of the sockets. These connections are where you would plug in your HID ballast when you're using it with an HID kit. So this one side, this is how you would trigger it. It's got it on both sides, so I'm using this side. I've actually got an old harness from an HID kit I'm not using to kind of tap in power and ground. So those leads are what's going to trigger this relay, which is going to send power through the harness to the lights. So the harness has to have power too. So as you can see, I've got, this is the negative side for the harness power. and the positive side hooked up right there. So this red lead, I've already got that attached, comes down into this harness here where we're going to trigger it. And right here I've got the ground lead coming back, so when I put this ground onto the ground terminal of the battery, it's going to trigger that relay, which is going to send the battery power through the harness to these lights. So let me hook that up. So you hear the relay click. Now I've got power to my lights. So yeah, just kind of a quick little overview of how that harness works. You know, this is a great harness for, I got a couple videos, one where I did the fog lights on the Escort, and I also did the high beams on the Lincoln. Just a great way to kind of bypass some of the factory wiring. The other thing that this harness is good for is, like, maybe you've got an ATV or a snowmobile. You know, those vehicles don't have very robust wiring, so if you're doing an HID kit on in an application like that, this harness is really one of the best ways to go. And then I think what I'm actually going to do with this harness now is I'm going to use these lights to run this battery down. You know, like I said in my NOCO Genius charger review, I'm going to try to use the repair mode on it, so I really have to beat up this battery to try to make that happen. So I'm going to be charging and discharging it. This is probably one of the safest ways I can go about discharging it. So hopefully this video helps out, gives you a little better understanding of how that harness works. Alright, so here's the H4 high-low HID kit. Just going to run through this harness to kind of show you the difference. So with this harness, the grounding is a little bit different. So I've got, this is the fused power lead right there. So that would go to the positive side of the battery, and like the other HID harness actually has a negative lead that you would tap directly to the battery, but this is where the high-low kit is a little different. Basically what happens on the high-low kit is, you can see on the plug that's going to go into the ballast, there's actually a little ground wire coming off of it. So when this kit is installed, you have to ground both of the ballasts to the chassis. So here's a good example. Like, here's that plug plugged into the ballast. That's the ballast plugged into the bulb. These two connections are for the ballast to power the bulb, and then this little connection here, the black and red wire, that's what controls your high-low function. And you can see here in the background, that silver connector is going to be your ground wire. See how that comes back to this harness? Just like this. And it's kind of the same deal. One side of the harness is slightly longer than the other. So it's basically the same situation. You know, whichever side the battery is on would get the shorter run. And then the other part of this is it's going to plug into one of your factory headlight harnesses. So one of your headlight harnesses that would plug into like your stock halogen bulb, you're just going to disconnect it and just wrap it in tape, just kind of secure it. You're not going to use it. And basically what's going to happen then is, when you turn your headlights on, it's going to send power from your harness to this plug that's plugged in to where your halogen bulb used to plug in, and it's going to send power to this harness. It's going to activate the relay in here, and the relay is going to grab your direct power off of this, off of your, where you tapped it into the battery, and send it through, and then it's going to be grounded to the chassis, and that's going to complete the circuit. So a little bit different having those two separate grounds. I figured I'd just kind of show that little bit of difference between the standalone harness and what you're going to get doing a high-low kit.